Today, we're going to reflect on building climate-friendly travel communities with a focus on consumers, primarily on travelers, but also on residents. So let me start by reminding you of our vision of an evolving climate-friendly travel community in the years to come. For climate resilience and emission reductions following the EU climate law, which in turn sits within the broad UN 2030-2050 green and clean framework. Number one, it starts with the stakeholders in the community itself. There has to be a sense of wanting to be a climate-friendly travel community. Number two, the travel and tourism companies register on the climate-friendly travel registry. This produces a capacity for measurement of the whole, and it also gives transparency of climate action and sustainability action plans for residents and for consumers, for travelers. Number three, and here we have the heart of our system, the strong climate champions, graduates who have been trained for over a year on the program and who then take an internship for a year in order to help bed down the program. And number four is our eco badge, something that allows the community, along with all the other badges that it may display, to say, we're in favor of climate-friendly travel and we're taking action to help make it happen in our community. We believe that this will help to foster a growing climate and sustainability mindset across the entire community. And I want to reiterate, for us, the driving force behind this is committed youth. And I want to play you an extract from a World Economic Forum video, which actually puts this sense of the evolving role of the youth into a global perspective.
Good morning and welcome to this discussion on addressing the drivers of eco-anxiety. There's been many discussions we've had in Davos, about the war in Ukraine, about energy prices and food prices, global politics. But looming behind all of that is the issue of climate change, which is real and it's relentless. But it's also giving rise to a certain degree of anxiety amongst our people. A recent global study of 10,000 young people, 16 to 25 in 10 countries, revealed some very troubling findings. 6 in 10 said they were either very or extremely worried about climate change. Over half use words like sad, anxious, angry, helpless, or guilty to describe how they were feeling about climate change. 77% considered the future frightening. More than half said they felt that humanity is doomed. And 65% felt that the governments were failing them and not doing enough to tackle this issue. So we want to spend the first part of our session this morning discussing this issue of eco-anxiety, and then going on to looking at what we might do about this anxiety and how we can help turn anxiety to agency and then action. And to do that, I have a very inspiring group of individuals here on my panel. First of all, Elizabeth Wathuti, who is the founder of the Green Generation Initiative in Kenya. Then Ina Moja, who is a land ambassador with the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. And then Kahea Pacheco, who is a co-director of the Women's Earth Alliance from the USA. And last but not least, David Dow, who is a World Economic Forum Global Shaper and also a researcher at the ETH here in Zurich. First, let's talk about eco-anxiety. I mean, it's an issue which is out there, but I'd like to get a sense from you, because you work in this space. So let me start with Elizabeth. You know, you've heard the findings, you've seen the video. Young people saying they feel helpless and angry and guilty. Tell me a little bit about your connection, the people you speak and work with. How does that anxiety manifest itself, and what do you think is driving it?
I think eco-anxiety is an issue that we have often failed to actually give a priority, because it's happening, it's affecting so many young people. And from my point of view, I've spent the past few days talking about the humanitarian crisis in the Horn of Africa. And these are things that we see every day and not impacts that we are waiting to experience in the future. It's about the drought situation that is impacting women, children, and communities that have least contributed to this crisis. And of course, these are people who are also losing hope for their future, because right now they're already facing these worst impacts. And the reason why young people are anxious, it's not because of the fact that science says that things are going to be catastrophic. It's because what people are doing and what we see the leaders doing is still far much away from what science says we must do. And if we see that there's that delay in action, then that's what causes the anxiety, because some time back somebody asks if we should begin to communicate differently about the climate crisis. And I said, no, we're not afraid of the truth of what science says about these impacts. What makes us anxious is the fact that science says that the problem is this huge and it will only become more catastrophic if nothing is done, and still we don't see action being taken. And what we see is these communities really continuing to be greatly impacted. And also, we say a lot that governments are seen as failing to respond adequately to this problem. But again, this is not just a perception that is among the anxious young people, as we say it. It's a plain and undeniable truth. And we've heard it from different people, from the scientific community, from even the UN Secretary General, and many other people will attest to this, that this is the truth, and it's actually an undeniable truth that we have to move faster if we want to also address this issue of eco-anxiety. And again, it's about acknowledging it, that young people have every right to be angry, to be frustrated, and to actually demand for action, because this is about their future. This is about a future that is not guaranteed with the way in which things are being done today.
You spoke at COP26 and made the point that governments weren't doing enough. Is that a strong feeling that you're hearing from people all around you?
Definitely, governments are not doing enough, because if they were doing enough, then this humanitarian crisis would not be worsening. It's been almost half a year since COP26, where leaders met, and what we are seeing is the fact that this crisis still continues to impact people on the front lines. And this is a truth that we are not the only ones that are saying it. This is a truth that is being felt by people on the front lines. And again, they have been attending these negotiations and making pledges even before I was born. And the fact that we still see not much being done is a big challenge to all of us, that we need to be doing much more, because emissions are still rising. So how is it that we can say that governments are doing enough, and yet we are still so much far away from what science says we must do?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Let me bring it in now. You've heard words like, feeling sad and anxious and angry and powerless and helpless. Tell me how that strikes you.
I think that it's very important to include young people in the conversation, to really work with them and give them the opportunity to be part of not just the conversation, but also in doing something. Because it's generation before that created what we are in right now. And we are still facing the fact that there is not a real bridge between this generation and the younger one. And we've seen them in the streets around the world coming out saying that they want to be heard, they want to participate into doing something. And they are holding people accountable, people who are leaders. And the leadership, unfortunately, has failed them. They have failed them. And so I completely understand when you watch the news, the cycle of news, it can become super anxious, because we are just talking about the problem and not the solutions. Or sometimes when we talk about the solutions, it's just words. And action needs to follow words. We need to act on it. Otherwise, this generation is going to hold us accountable, and rightfully so.
David, you're a global shaper with the WEF, and watching that video, which I think you helped put together as well, and the references to the vulnerability and the fragility of the planet and young people having this sense of foreboding. You were telling me earlier that you, having been in Davos all week, also felt this sense of impatience. Tell us a little bit about that sentiment.
So I'm born and raised in Germany. I'm representing the global north, but my parents are refugees from Vietnam. And that reminds me and connects me very deeply to the climate crisis, which is not about nature, it's not about climate, it's about the people. The climate crisis, the United Nations High Refugee Council estimates that 1 billion refugees, 1 billion people all around the world by 2050 will be displaced. These are, and coming from a family such as this, I know what it means to lose home, to have to start new, to be uncertain and to face danger and conflicts and potentially death. And growing up in the global north, I, of course, started to trust my leaders and say, okay, we're gonna make it. Like we have democracy, we elect the most competent, potentially leaders, business leaders, political leaders. We have to raise some funds to solve climate crisis. $100 billion a year was pledged, right? And again and again and again over the years, I've seen they failing, but re-pledging. Seen failing to keep up the promise of reducing deforestation by 2030, but re-pledging the same pledge in Glasgow. And seen them even failing, don't need $100 billion, we need trillions of dollars. But saying, okay, sorry, we don't have the money, we don't know how to save it in our economy, in education. But then what struck me, and what really, really struck my trust, is that when the COVID pandemic happened, and there was another crisis that affected them directly, and also the wealth of the developed nations, suddenly $15,000 billion was raised in a year. And this is money that is borrowed by future generations, by us. So not only are they not willing to raise the money to protect the climate, but they're also taking our financial freedom in the future because this money needs to be paid back. And also, talking about money, and this is one of the things I want to bring in this last part, this is not how we young people think. I really don't like to tell, when I go to a panel and say, plant a tree for $1, you will get back $8. Or, okay, here, nature is like the biggest investment opportunity we've seen so far to attract more of these finances, because these $100 billion are not grants, they are loans where countries and investors expect a return. So they are not like for free. And I don't understand why, and this is a discrepancy between how young people think, because we look at the crisis as an existential crisis, as a moral crisis, as something that affects us as people, the lives that live there. But instead, in order to convince our leaders, we need to state it as a business case to make sure like the global south is like a business opportunity. They are not. These leaders from the global south, they are our superheroes. They are actually protecting us right now from a climate crisis by preserving forests, nature, and so on. And this is something that has to be mentioned here.
Thanks, David. Kahir, you work with young people and women in 24 countries. Is that sense of this being a moral crisis something that comes to the fore?
Absolutely, this is a moral crisis. And I guess I can start with sharing a story. On September 9th, 2020, my son was born. And I woke up at 9 a.m. that morning with enough time to make it to the hospital. But when I opened my eyes, I remember wondering if I slept through the day or did I wake up way too early, because it was pitch black. So I went to the window and I looked outside, and it was like the apocalypse had hit. And this is in Northern California. It was 9 a.m. and there was no daylight. It might as well have been 11 p.m. The sky outside was dark and orange, and there was particles of ash kind of just floating around. And this is because we're in such a severe drought and have had such a lack of water and rainfall in Western North America, that fires from British Columbia all the way down to California had just ravaged the region in the weeks prior, and the air quality, this was the result. We'd all started speaking this different language about air quality index, like, oh, what's your AQI today? What sensor are you using to test your AQI? Have you been outside? Does your chest hurt? Did you breathe outside? These are all questions that had become part of our common conversation. And on that morning, when I woke up and looked outside, I remember thinking, is this the world I'm bringing this child into? Is this what we are leaving future generations? And that story, that experience is not unique to me. It's by no means unique to my region. The women we work with in Kalimantan, Indonesia, face that kind of air quality and those black and orange skies on a daily basis because of the fires in the forests there, fires that are set to burn forests, to clear it, and to drain peatlands for agriculture.
So in such a climate-friendly travel world, how will we engage the travelers themselves and the broader public? Much is made in the media and on the metaverse of the fact that it is the public themselves who are calling for sustainable travel and tourism. Or, if they are not calling for it, they will welcome it and, importantly, be prepared to pay more for the privilege. How true is this? Or how much is just clever marketing? I want to now play a video from Xavier Font, who I think is one of the top marketing professors in travel and tourism. Xavier is a professor at the University of Surrey.
Many companies have worked for a long time now to be more sustainable, and they're taking real responsibility for that sustainability, not only of their own company, but of the environment in which they work. Having said that, very often they're saying, how do I make sure that my sustainability makes sense to what the consumers want? How do I make sure that my consumers reward me and appreciate the type of responsibility efforts that I'm taking for that sustainability? So what we're going to talk about now is specifically that element of taking responsibility from a marketing point of view. I'm not going to talk about the triple bottom line. What I really want to look at is how does it make sense for a company to use sustainability as a marketing tool? And the information I'm now presenting and the report I'm referring to are available in my own website, and they basically follow 5 different steps. And the steps are very straightforward, and we'll look at each one of them in turn. So the first step really is, how do I tell to a consumer that I'm responsible, that I'm taking responsibility for that sustainability? And you need to really, as a company, think about what your customers will be responding to you about the message that you're putting across. So you may decide that you want to target the type of consumer that you think will be altruistic, and there will be the type of consumer that will buy your product because you are green, because you're sustainable. I'm afraid to tell you this responsible, sustainable, altruistic consumer is very rare. The majority of us, when we go on holiday, we are very selfish. We've worked for that holiday very hard all year round. And it seems to us it's a time to look after ourselves. So it's more likely that your consumer doesn't fall in this first category, but it falls in a second category that says, I want a more responsible product because it's a better product. Because this is a product that really makes me feel better about what I'm consuming, because I'm going to enjoy myself more by the fact that I am buying a product that is green or sustainable. Now, if you manage to turn it around from this product that is more altruistic to the product that is enhanced product quality, you're broadening the market appeal of your product. You may find that your kind of customer at the moment just says, well, I expect a company of your size, of your scale, of your location is already doing this. I'm not really willing to pay more for it. I expect that companies in this day and age will be treating their staff properly, will not be polluting unnecessarily. So I may get very annoyed if I find out that you're not doing it, but I'm not necessarily going to buy from you because you are doing it. You may well find that your customer falls in the next category. I don't really want to know you're doing it. I'm very happy that you are, okay? But I don't mind if you want to put the effort in. Just don't annoy me with it. I'm not here because your product is really green, but providing it does not reduce my customer experience, providing it doesn't mean that you'll give me fewer towels, or that the water will be cold in the shower, there will be no water, or that I will not get to really see and explore the places that I want to see, that'll be fine by me. There's only a very small percentage of your customers that will avoid your product because you are telling them that you're green. Okay, and you need to really then think about how is it that you will be communicating that message to those customers. The statistics we usually quote are the ones towards the top end of this table that you've got now. The ones that says that more than 50% of the customers would want to stay in an accommodation provider that is engaging with sustainability, or that if two hotels were the same, more than 50% of customers would choose the one that has a green award. The statistics that usually don't get quoted very often, but are very important to us as well, are the ones towards the bottom of this page. The fact that 46% of customers say, I don't want to think about being green when I'm on holiday. I think about recycling when I'm at home every day, and that's, nearly all year round. And for the 2 weeks when I'm on holiday, I just want to relax. There's a percentage of customers, 33% of them based on this Visit England study, that basically said to us, I believe sustainability is just a way of you as a company being a cheapskate, of you basically telling me that you are green because it's good for planet Earth, but in effect all you're trying to do is wash fewer towels or give me a substandard product. And in effect there's 15% of customers that believe that a hotel that is run on environmentally friendly credentials is actually a hotel that is less comfortable than one that doesn't have those green credentials. So it's very important for you as a company that's trying to use the sustainability as a positive marketing tool, that you realize there's a number of people out there that will be quite skeptical about what you're saying, and therefore it's really important that you don't just say to your customers, I'm a green company, come and buy from me, because this has mixed feelings, it has mixed messages towards your market. And so what really matters is that you tell your company what is meaningful about you being green for that customer experience. You need to really tell me, how will it make a difference, a positive difference to you as a consumer, because remember this is a selfish time of year when we go on holiday, that you are buying a green product. So that's one step, we've got 4 to go. Second step is, why are you telling your consumers that you're a green company? You may think that this is a very strange question to ask, but we need to be very clear about the response we expect our customers to have on the back of the message. In the same way, you need to be very clear about any message or any response you expect from your customers from any advertising campaign. Okay? So you may decide that you want to tell your customers that your company is green, not because you want them to change their behavior, but simply because you want to reassure them that what you are telling them makes sense to them. So you want your customers to feel good by basically you saying to them, but look, I'm doing my bit as a company, and by the simple fact that you're buying my product, you're already doing your bit. And it seems to me it's very useful as a message for larger companies, corporate companies, the companies where your customer is not necessarily going to feel or taste the difference, where you just give them that reassurance that you have done something for them without them having to worry very much. And for most companies, and maybe your company is one of those, that's where we need to start. Really, this is the situation where you just simply say, I'm doing it, okay? You may decide there is a second situation in here where you say, that's not quite good enough. I need my customer to realize that we've gone beyond this. And I'm saying, I want to promote the sustainability as a way of raising awareness and changing behavior. Okay? I need to tell my customer that what I'm doing will make a difference to them, but that they need to do something in return. Now, if you're going to do this, you have to make sure that you're very specific. A vague message frustrates. I often use the example that if I get home tonight and I say to my wife, how was your day, darling? And she says to me, Xavier, be a good husband. I know I've done something very wrong, but I still don't know what I need to do different. Your message from your company quite often is an equivalent. You're saying to your customer, be a sustainable tourist, be a green consumer. It's simply telling your customer that your customer is wrong, but you haven't really told your customer what they need to do different. You haven't really told them how to behave differently. So it's important that this message is specific, but it's also very important that you show to your customer the difference they will make. How will you buying that product going to really help for this destination, for this location to become more sustainable? What will you offer your customer in return for the fact that you ask your customer to change their behavior? And so here's just one example from the UK, where one particular hotel asks customers to donate £5 every time that they buy an overnight stay in this hotel. But as part of the buying process, they're suggesting to you not just the fact that you should buy, you should donate this money, but they're giving you different options of where you may want to donate this money. And by giving you the options, they're somehow empowering for you to decide where you want to make a difference. Okay. A third element, a third way in which you may decide to tell your customers, and a third expectation from you towards your customers may well be that you want to tell your customers that you are green because you want to offer them something extra. You want to give them an opportunity, in particular in low season, shoulder season, in particular in times of year when you know you're not going to be full and you can dedicate a bit more time to your customers, to actually engage with sustainability, engage with a more real part of that destination that goes beyond what you can offer in your peak season. Okay? And it seems to me makes a lot of sense to do this, because it is at this time of year when you can do something special. Let me give you another example which seems to work quite well. A property in Wales I work with, where I simply said to them, what happens around March? And they said, well, we're empty, but I can see you've got some sheep out here. Are any of your sheep pregnant? Yes, they are. So could you offer to some of your customers that usually come in autumn, not the ones that normally come in March, why don't you come this March and you can be a midwife for our baby lambs and you can help the baby lambs to be born? Now, when I spoke again with that self-catering property, they simply said to me, March is our new August. March is full now because we've got a very loyal clientele that not only really wanted to experience this, but is the clientele that is now blogging about it, is taking photos, they're uploading them in Facebook, and they talk about this experience to many, many other possible customers. So we're now finding ourselves that we've offered something extra by providing a more real, more authentic, engaging experience at a time of year when otherwise it would be very difficult to do this. You may decide that you want to engage with sustainability to get more customers. Now, the majority of companies I talk to simply say to me, we just want to do this from the very beginning. It won't necessarily work like this. For you to get more customers or for you to increase prices, it's going to be very difficult. And it seems to me getting more customers will be even more important than increasing your prices at peak season. Remember, we all like a bargain. So the idea of us being able to feel that we're getting more for our money, whether it is by paying less for our product or by simply saying, I'm going to get more services for the same price, you need to really decide which direction you're going to take this. Okay? But I'll just give you a couple of examples on this. A property, again, in the south of England, where they use the incentive of coming by train and paying 10% less on the standard tariff for your hotel as a way of increasing the number of midweek conference users. Okay, and they've actually found that now between 30 and 40% of their midweek conference market comes by train. Companies much preferred it because this way their staff can be working along the way, which otherwise if you're driving you cannot work. And the companies were encouraging the staff now to travel by public transport. And what the hotel has found is that they have increased their occupancy rate because of this. Clearly, it was much harder to increase the percentage of people that came at weekends using public transport, because then people want to kind of go out for the day and do things differently during that time. Third step. The third step basically for me is, what do I say? What am I going to tell my customer about sustainability? And I think we established at the beginning of the presentation that the thing you should never ever say to your customer is, I am a sustainable company. It's a very dangerous message because each one of your possible customers will understand something different by it. And you need to make sure, therefore, that you're communicating a message that most of your customers can understand similarly. Okay? So a message is not confusing to your customer. And you need to make sure that your message is consistent across not only your sustainability policy, but also across every single area of your the different messages that you're communicating. So the idea of having a CSR policy, a corporate social responsibility policy, that is very much at odds with the type of message and impression you're causing elsewhere is actually very unhelpful for you as a company. So you may decide that the message you want to communicate is, I am a more sustainable company, and this in effect means you as a customer are going to have more fun. You will participate, you will engage, you'll be able to get your hands dirty, you'll be able to do things differently. Whether it is by telling your customers, I'm going to provide you with a wheelbarrow picnic. When you arrive, there's going to be a picnic basket, and in there, there's going to be small samples of food from local producers. And it's important that you taste this before you actually go to the supermarket, because this way you get to taste some real food from this area. And in the basket, there is a map that tells you where you can go and buy from those producers afterwards. And you've just actually found now that somebody didn't travel for a long way that day, but they went and bought local produce, and some of the local suppliers were very happy to provide a very small sample of, you know, cheese, bread, ham, pickles, you know, whatever it happened to be. Or whether it is by saying, well, how much better does food taste when you pick your own lunch than when it was picked for you? Okay, so get customers to engage in that experience. Provide opportunities for customers to learn something, but don't make them feel like they've gone back to school. Try a fun, interesting, engaging way of doing this. The same with children's quizzes. Provide a quiz to help your children to do the guiding of a walk nearby, as opposed to telling them you have to go somewhere else and you need to be quiet and you need to listen. Get your children to be the ones that basically tell you how to go from one place to another, visiting different locations. Give them a quiz about things they can see in the local village, all of which will help you to reduce CO2 emissions from your particular customers because they didn't drive a long way away again, and it providing them a reason to come and stay with you as opposed to go somewhere else because they were able to do many things nearby. So you need to think about this fun aspect of sustainability and how sustainability is not the end in itself, but for many customers is a means to an end. Okay, so just to give you another example that relates to this, this is from a tourist attraction in the UK that simply used to have a sign that said, you will be fined a very large amount of money if you found smoking. In effect, they changed the sign to be something that was much more fun, and the sign that is now at the height of children's eyes is not targeting the parents, it's targeting the children, so the children will become the best policemen of their own parents' behavior. And the sign, as you can read, it said, no smoking. It makes your breath smell and your teeth go horrid. And it was a much more powerful message than saying, if you smoke here, there could be a forest fire. The second message, it seems to me, is very important to communicate, is that sustainability, again, is not the end in itself, is a means to an end for most customers. And you're saying it's a tool for cultural immersion. It's a tool to be able to say to your customers, you really want to get to know this place you're visiting. You don't want a fake, experience. And if what you really want is a real experience, then our sustainability and the work that we do to be more sustainable will help you to experience this location in a much more fuller way. Okay, and linked to this, there would be a third element in here, which would be we're using sustainability to communicate better service. Okay, how many of your companies, or how many companies do you know that on their website they will say, we serve local food whenever possible? Well, do you believe I would still be married if I said to my wife, I will be nice to you whenever possible? Do you realize that's how ridiculous the message sounds? So if your message on your website right now says, I will serve food whenever possible, please, please, please change it. And my suggestion here would be, as a very different example, fresh, unadulterated, honest food that makes holidaying memorable. Why? Who wants the opposite to fresh? Who wants food that is adulterated? Who wants food that is dishonest? So you can see where I'm coming from. It doesn't really matter whether sustainability is important to you. If the way that you choose to communicate sustainability is through a message like the one I'm just mentioning now, you have many more chances of engaging a broader number and a broader range of consumers than if your message was, I will serve local food whenever possible, which frankly was never really going to work as a marketing message in the first place. I would propose that you sell sustainability as a tool for empathy, trust, and reducing risk. The message you're trying to say is, look, I'm a sustainable company and therefore I'm a company that thinks like you. I'm here for you. I'm a person just like you. I'm not a number. I'm not a business. We think alike. I am a serious business. That's why your money will be well spent by coming and staying with us. Okay? We're no joke. This is not just a place where you may or you may not get a good service. The fact that we look after our sustainability and we are so careful with the level of service we provide gives you an additional reassurance that our product is going to be right. And so I'm just giving you here one example of one of the messages that I found really resonated with me when I was looking for a family holiday. These people didn't just simply say to me, here's the tour and here's the price, go and figure. They actually said to me a message that sold me not the holiday. What these guys are telling me is that by traveling with them, I'm going to be a family again. By traveling with them, they're going to give me my children back. Those children that are obsessed with a PlayStation, with an Xbox, with technology, suddenly this company is saying to me, I have designed a holiday that will get you and your family become a family again and engage with the place you're going to visit by experiencing it together. My willingness to pay for getting my children back is much higher than my willingness to pay if you try to sell me how comfortable the bed is going to be in the hotel where I will stay. Because frankly, if I wanted a comfortable bed, I would just stay home. Fourth step, we're nearly getting there, the last two steps now just to go. Where am I going to tell my customers that I am a more sustainable company? Well, I'm suggesting that you communicate it absolutely everywhere, but you communicate it in a way that makes sense to your customers. So by all means, you may want to use certification, but certification is not a very good tool for communicating sustainability to your customers. Because what certification does is it gives reassurance to your customer that the things you'll communicate elsewhere on your website have been validated. Certification itself just simply says, I'm an award-winning company. It doesn't really tell them a message that's meaningful to their experience. Equally with awards, exactly the same situation. Very few companies win awards, so obviously the fact that you can say, I am an award-winning company is even more important than being able to say that you've been certified. But the issue here is, show me how you're extraordinary. Tell me. Besides showing me the logo of the award or the certification program, you'll need to do something else out there for me. Equally, if you have gained press coverage for being sustainable, frankly, by now, the only way you'll get press coverage for that is by having a very, very interesting story. No press will cover you because you've got solar panels, because you've reduced your CO2 emissions or your water consumption or your energy. So what you really need to do here is, by all means, you'll need to provide all those generic back of office sustainability aspects, but the message that the press will basically be interested in is that message that says, I am different, I have an experience, I have a story to tell, and I have a story to sell. And so I can just introduce you now to your new public relations manager. He's called Crispy, and if you eat Chinese food, you realize how cruel it is to call your duck Crispy. This was a little orphan that was collected by the owner of this particular property here in England, and basically was raised as a mascot because otherwise they thought, well, you know, this poor animal is going to die. What you can see at the bottom right-hand side of your screen now is the two front covers of two books dedicated to Crispy. There's Crispy the Duck and Crispy the Duck the sequel. And selling the profit from these books now is basically all the profits from that go to a local children's cancer ward. You can also see the doorstops. Crispy now has a photo calendar. There's all sorts of things now done on the theme of Crispy, all of which has meant that the press has got to love this little animal a lot more, and it has provided very good PR coverage for this property. Now, the property in the back of this communicates all sorts of other things, some of the boring sustainability things that we do, and some of the really exciting ones that we do as well. All I'm saying is, this company gets a lot better media attention than a company that has all the standard and frankly much more meaningful sustainability aspects, but the ones that don't really have a market appeal per se. The internet. Well, you must communicate your sustainability work on the internet. That doesn't mean that you have to communicate it on a page called Sustainability Policy and it doesn't mean that you have to be very boring about it. Okay, so do not allow your chief engineer or your maintenance engineer to communicate the sustainability work you do in the same way you would not allow your advertising manager to mess with your boiler or to sort out some of your, electric systems. Okay, these are very two different jobs, and they need to be done by two different people. And if you are a very small company where you need to do everything yourself, then good luck and try to get creative if you can. But what you shouldn't give us is a message as plain as this one: minimize waste by evaluating operations and ensuring they're fit for purpose. If your customers are not booking on the basis of your sustainability policy, and that's what you say, you deserve to have fewer customers, because that message is just terrible. So you have to find ways of being much more interesting in the type of messages that you communicate. Your fifth and final step is, when are you going to tell me that your company is green, that your company is sustainable, and that message really is meaningful for you as a customer? And frankly, you need to tell me all the time, and you need to tell me all the time in a different way, not in every possible place, but at every possible stage of your customer journey. Now, the key here is you need to really figure out different decisions your customers need to take at different points in time, and make sure the sustainability message you're giving me at each point in time is relevant to the decision they need to make. So before I book, before I purchase a product, I need to know a certain number of things about my product that are different to what I need to know about it once I've already booked and before I arrive, or once I've already left the property. So before I book, for example, I can give you the example of, if you go to a cafe, it's at the time of choosing your product that you'll need to know, for example, the number of calories that product will have. If you tell me the information on number of calories when I'm already drinking that hot chocolate at a whopping 328 calories, it's too late. And also by then it does not allow me to make my mind up. If you tell me at the time of purchasing, I have a choice of which is the product I want to buy. And frankly, the prices are not that different, and therefore you can make a reasonable choice. What this particular property told me is that since they published the information on calories, actually sales have gone up. And you may not believe this, but of course they have gone up. They tell me that people that now purchase an Americano at 2 calories also purchase a cake. Which just seems to prove to me that people's logic tends to be a little bit unusual, or maybe at first impression you would think is unusual, but eventually there is a logic to it. And therefore the message for me behind this is, there may be many things that you're not willing to try at the moment. Try them, and actually your customers may well surprise you. After booking and before arrival, you may find that your customers need to know something different. Okay, so if you told my customers before traveling that if you come to my destination by public transport, we'll give you 10% discount, great. But you need to tell me on their page, on their website, that says how to get there. If you told me this very same information when I already arrived and I've arrived by car, it's too late, and you will annoy me as a customer because you never gave me the choice. Equally here, you may decide, well, I'm going to a self-catering property. I have now decided I'm definitely going to that place. Now is the time when I'm going to decide how many things I'm willing to put in the car to go to that place, or whether I'm going to go by car or not. And it's maybe at this point in time when you need to say to them, which is the level of service you can provide to them, so they purchase food, or they allow you to purchase the food for them through food hampers, or providing ready-made food that you leave in their fridge, or providing activities, so they travel with fewer produce and they consume more of the local produce. Again, if you tell them they could use local food by the time they've already been to the supermarket, then it's too late. Okay? On arrival at the beginning of the tour, you will be able to give me a different message. Okay? And remember, there are no second chance of making a first impression. So it seems to me it is at this point in time that you need to really impress your customers with your policy. Until now, you've told them before they arrived that you have a policy, but you haven't really showed them what it is that you do. So this is your opportunity to do something about it. And then during the tour or during your stay, this really is your opportunity to show them many, many more things, one at a time, and enjoying them through time. Okay, and I could give you many more examples. This is a short presentation at the end of the day, and usually this presentation is part of a full day training workshop where I work with companies to achieve these things in practice. So you may just have to participate in one of those. But during your stay, during your tour, you got the opportunities to communicate a range of things that you could do for that company or that you're already doing for them, linked to different purposes you may have or why you're communicating. And you need to remember then at the end of your visit that it's also very important at this stage to use sustainability as a way of communicating to your customers in the long term. So if your customers have already left and you send them a message every few months saying, I am desperate for business, please come and stay back, your customers will not react very well because they'll just see that as spam. If you use a variety of your sustainability messages to remind your customers of just how enjoyable, how unique, how special their stay was, and you send them messages that basically tell them about what's about to happen in your property or what's just happened, you're much more likely to be able to engage with them. And you need to really think about at this stage, what will you be selling as a message to these people? Okay, so I just wanted to finish with one very last example of a property, once more here in the UK, but this could be done in a variety of places, where they simply said, when at the end of the season our flower meadows basically are not looking so strong anymore, and we allow some of the customers to cut some of those flowers with us, and we help them to press those flowers. And as we all know, when you press flowers, you need to leave them pressed for some time. And therefore what we do is we get those families to press the flowers, leave them with us. The children quite often make a card, and then we write down the address, and then we send them just before Christmas the pressed flowers with a card they made, and we just send it to them saying, well, a little souvenir and a memento from your stay in our property. Which is a really, really fantastic marketing message. And it comes to prove you don't need to be very technologically aware sometimes to be able to do some of the things we talk about. You don't need a very high budget. You don't need to be thinking with technology and all sorts of social media and so on. By all means, use all that if you can. The point I'm trying to make is that for every single one of you as a company, there is a way of using sustainability as part of enhancing your customer experience. And there is a way in which you can use that enhancing customer experience as part of your marketing of your property. You market all the time. You market through all the channels that you've got. You need to provide a variety of messages through your marketing. And the more that those can relate to enhancing customer experience, the better. To do this, you needed to be very clear to understand what you wanted your customers to do different because of the message you provided. And clearly, to do all of these, you need to understand your customers much better in the first place. I hope this was of use to you. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope that if you have some questions, you'll go to my website and you'll ask me the questions very soon. Goodbye.
And I want to follow this with a couple more videos from active companies in the Southeast Asia Mekong region, who we have been working with to show how committed corporations can make a real difference on the ground. And I'm sure there are many similar examples across Europe.
Greetings from Bangkok. I'm glad to be here and honored to be here. Thank you, Geoffrey Lipman, for inviting me to talk about corporate commitment to climate-friendly travel, which is very close to my heart. Well, first of all, let me start with the statement that travel and tourism is essential. If there was ever a time that it is shown that it is essential, it is right now. I'm reporting from the Mekong region, where all of our countries have been closed for the last full year. So borders closed, and people have lost their incomes and their livelihoods because of these closed borders. Thailand, for example, where I am, 20% of its GDP at the very least is coming from tourism. So having no tourism at all is really harmful. Now, what can tourism do to help to alleviate some of the massive problems that the world is facing? And I take out four, and I take out these four because they are positive trends that actually tourism can leverage into using itself as a tourism as a force for good. So these are not all the problems that we solve, that we face, but at least a few that tourism can help with. Let me start by the number one, and that's poverty. As you can see from this graph, poverty overall is coming down precipitously in the world. The red line is East Asia and Pacific, and you can see that it's really coming down really, really fast. In the insert, you can see a photo of a cycling company in Cambodia, and Siem Reap to be exact, that is helping travelers to explore Angkor by bicycle. Now, you have to realize that in 1993, Cambodia had nothing. It just came out of a civil war and actually decades of war. So you can see that in 30, 40 years, a country can really develop very, very fast and come out of poverty. This is why these lines are coming down, partly why these lines are coming down so precipitously. What can travel and tourism do? Well, they can engage the poorer countries. Travelers can travel there, and entrepreneurs and travel companies can put their money in countries like this and development in countries like this. Then we got overpopulation. I think for tourism, development in general, it's worth looking at population density, like in a graph like this. And you can see that population density is not equal around the world. So without going into the details, you can imagine that the travel and tourism industry can do a lot with facts like this in order to develop in a sustainable way. By and large, world population growth rates is going down as well, and this is good news for the future. This, of course, is well into the future because our overall life expectancy is going up as well, which is good news. The red line is behind us, the blue line is in front of us. I'm not quite sure, nobody's quite sure about the blue line, but it looks like the red line over the past will continue on going down, and that is going to help us. Another one where tourism can help really a lot is in preventing deforestation and in assisting conservation of natural areas. As a matter of fact, about 23%, or actually tropical forest cover can help mitigating climate change by 23%, just by keeping tropical forest cover as it is right now, and think about only in regrowing and regenerating this. This is actually a slide, or this is a photo of one of our other companies. This is a cardamom tented camp in the west of Cambodia. It helps to conserve 180 square kilometers of lowland rainforest, and we help the conservation efforts of Wildlife Alliance, which is active in this area as well. We are completely off the grid, completely solar powered, and our guests contribute to the conservation of this area. This is also part of the problem, is pollution. One of the issues that we have to deal with, in particular here in the Mekong region, is that we depend on long-haul flights or medium-haul flights for travelers to come here. So we depend on the airline industry to do more when it comes to their emissions. Harold Goodwin, who is actually also part of Sunnex, has been working hard on this as well, and has been publishing, co-authoring for the WTM an interesting article on how airlines can do more. We agree with that article, but at the same time, what can we do in the travel industry? We are dependent on the airlines to come here. We can help them by working together with REDD plus projects there throughout the world. And we also have to recognize that the airline industry has been growing very, very fast, as you can see from their emissions in the red graph here. But I can see in the blue graph, they also have been working on their efficiency, and they have become much more efficient over their growth period as well. More needs to be done. but this is up to the airline industry and their innovation as well. What can we do on the ground? We can make sure that our travelers do less when it comes to short-haul travel, short-haul flights when they are in the destination, and engage more in slow travel. Making the most of each moment is one of the slogans that Kiwi Travel is now using in promoting their programs as well. And one more issue when it comes to positive news, and that is when it comes to competition, the travel industry, the competition is playing out along the triple bottom line. It's no longer the one that makes the most money will survive. It is the ones that contribute to environmental conservation and to community engagement. These are all very good and positive changes, and it shows that tourism can be a force for good.
Hi everyone, my name is Hamish Keith and I'm the CEO of XO Travel Group, a leading destination management company in Asia with operations in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore and Japan. Today I want to talk about how we engage with communities to deliver on our goals to be a responsible travel operator and promote sustainable travel within the countries we operate. XO Travel has been operating since 1993, and as a destination management company, we're the people on the ground delivering the final services to tourists and travellers, and in doing so engage with communities on a daily basis. Before COVID, we had 980 people working full-time in 10 countries, and in 2019 we welcomed 160,000 travellers to our destinations. XO operates across a number of segments, including luxury travel, adventure travel and group touring, and our focus is on tailor-made experiential travel, authenticity and sustainability. This is, of course, a challenge for a large organisation. So we have developed a deep and sincere commitment to sustainable travel and have enshrined a promise to be responsible within our company values and embrace sustainability not only as a core component of our company culture, but as a foundation pillar for our business strategy. We have an active foundation headed by a very capable Director of Sustainability, plus sustainability coordinators in all our destinations. In addition, we're third-party certified by Travel Life and undergo biannual audits, as well as being part of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, an active participant in SunX and many other initiatives. We engage our community every day and on multiple levels, and therefore feel very responsible for the impact of tourism on the environment and on those communities. We actively engage on climate action through education programs for our employees, suppliers and local communities. We're able to measure, reduce and compensate for our emissions through carbon credits and have a goal in place to be fully carbon neutral, not only as a company, which we've already achieved, but for the entire in-country carbon footprint of all of our guests. We ensure education and awareness runs right through our supply chain through an active education program to share best practices with our suppliers. We deliver on our emission compensation through tree planting programs and campaign hard to reduce single-use plastic. We engage the wider travel community by spearheading stakeholder groups and have created or co-founded networks to raise awareness in our communities at the grassroots level. Many communities in our destinations are extremely vulnerable to changes in the ecosystem or climate, and we provide direct support via our foundation, as well as investing in communities to protect the environment, which we do through the Kalawet organisation, which has been fighting for the preservation of biodiversity in Indonesia by purchasing private forest reserves to protect animals from palm oil plantations and also from tourism. Through our foundation, we have invested in significant projects. Some examples are the Gaya Siem Reap, which is the first and only glass recycling centre in Cambodia that transforms glass into sand for the construction industry, and Reform in Vietnam, which turns non-recyclable plastic waste into furniture and is an outstanding example of how social enterprise can work sustainably to benefit the local community and improve the overall tourism experience. We support and engage communities through education. As part of their jobs, XO staff train students on environmental issues from Salai Baig School in Cambodia and the University of Phnom Penh, and have trained 900 students in 2 years. We have a strong cooperation with SunX to develop climate-friendly travel for students in Indonesia and Cambodia, and have developed partnerships with universities in Phnom Penh and in Bali. We empower communities to create and deliver travel experiences for our visitors, and have developed a comprehensive rating system to evaluate the sustainability practices of the travel experiences and tours that we operate. We have in total over 421 experiences listed as responsible on our website. Some examples of projects that we support, work closely with, and support through our travel programs are shown here, including a project at Busra Eco Park, where all local vendors are now using reusable cutlery and have become guardians of their own environment. And I would like to especially mention the people of Huay Pu Keng, a Kayar village in Mae Hong Son province in Thailand. The Kayar are people from Myanmar that migrated to Thailand many years ago and had suffered exploitation as part of a human zoo that was encouraged by tourism and local tour operators. The community is now working with an NGO called Fair Tourism on a path towards sustainability and self-reliance to develop non-exploitative tourism programs and welcome visitors on their own terms. This is a powerful example of how positive engagement by stakeholders in tourism can repair some of the wrongs that were in fact created in some respects by tourism in the first place. Like most of us, I believe travel and tourism is a powerful force that none of us can resist, and the deep longing for travel we all feel during this imposed hiatus reinforces the fact that travel will return in force. And while like any powerful force it can overconsume or cause harm to the environment, travel and tourism also has the capacity to do enormous good and contains all the elements to make it self-sustainable. Of course, this takes work, energy, effort, education, engagement and vision. And as we adjust to a future that we believe will be more aware and demand more responsibility from all of us, the stakeholders, it's ever more important that we all work together to plan a path ahead that really is sustainable.
We firmly believe that it will be companies and cities that will be at the heart of driving the change that we are going to have to make to meet the SDG 2030 and Paris 2050 targets. Visitors will be conditioned over time to adapt to these changes, as will residents. The smart players will be positioning themselves now, and we like to think that the whole idea of climate-friendly travel will be on their radar screens. Now let's take another example, the city of Amsterdam, and see how it's reshaping itself for this new climate, new post-pandemic economy.
This is the donut. The goal of the donut is to meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet. Sometimes when I present the ideas of donut economics, people say, is this capitalism or is this communism or is it socialism? And you think, really? Are these the only choices we have? The isms of the last century? Can we not come up with some ideas of our own and create new names for them and see new patterns? Governments in every country are almost addicted to citing GDP figures as if this was proof of success, and yet it's so clearly not. Because we have climate breakdown and COVID lockdown and financial meltdown, we have to pursue something far richer to move from this pursuit of endless growth, which we can now see is hitting us with crisis after crisis, moving to a goal of thriving. And the donut is absolutely possible to turn not into a single number, but into a dashboard. We could hold policymakers to account and say every year, you need to talk about how you are making progress on these different dimensions of the donut. Our outside the donut is created by leading Earth system scientists just a decade ago. These are the 9 life-supporting systems of planet Earth. To have a stable climate, to have healthy oceans, to have recharging fresh water. And they drew these and called them the planetary boundaries. And they said we must stay in the circle in the middle. I thought, but if we go to the center of the circle, where we use hardly any of Earth's resources, that's not thriving. That is actually death and destitution for billions of people. We need to convert Earth's lands for food, for water, for housing, for energy. So I drew this inner circle and said, just as there is an outer limit of humanity's pressure on the planet, so too there must be an inner limit. So the hole in the middle is a place where people are left falling short on the essentials of life. It's where people don't have the food, water, energy, healthcare, housing, education, political voice that every person has a claim to meeting. We want to leave nobody in this hole, get everybody into the green ring of the donut itself. Ever since the donut was first published in 2012, people have been wanting to downscale it to the scale of a city or a neighborhood or a nation. And Amsterdam is the first place where we've actually downscaled it. And I've worked together with an organization called Circle Economy, who have been helping the city devise their strategy.
Amsterdam having a very ambitious vision of becoming a fully circular city by 2050. What happens with the donut is that because it brings all these themes together of the social aspects and the environmental, you need to start a conversation with everybody in the room. We invited all different departments that they were not used to be part of this conversation. How can we create housing in Amsterdam that is available for all different incomes, at the same time is supporting the well-being of people who live in the house, and how does this construction is made with materials that reducing the global emissions and the climate. With the city donut, we suddenly see in the portrait of the city the impact that Amsterdam has in, let's say, Bangladesh, and people's life there that work in producing the clothes that we wear in Amsterdam, and how a city can start thinking about all this and creating strategies that are taking this into account.
The donut does not give us answers. You don't plug in a calculation and it tells you how to do it. What it does is provide a space for people to come together. In fact, in Amsterdam, the policymakers said, we now realize that if we're aiming to get into the donut, we need to change our own internal organization so that we're more holistic and connected in our planning and policy. And I think smart policymakers realize that they don't need a solution to financial crisis and a different one to climate crisis and a different one to health emergencies. They need a paradigm that no longer pushes for endless growth, but instead focuses on thriving, on resilience, and on well-being within communities. We began with this downscaling in rich cities, in high-income nations, because they are the ones that have the greatest obligation to transform, to come back within planetary boundaries. But I believe the framework that we've created can absolutely be adapted and used in low-income countries and cities. In fact, in Costa Rica, they've just launched an initiative called Regenerate Costa Rica. They have an ambition to become one of the world's first regenerative nations, and they're using the donut as a framework for guiding them to that goal. It always looks like transformation is going to take many, many decades. And one thing I think we've seen in many countries from this COVID pandemic is that actually policies can happen almost overnight when governments decide to make them happen. Change is absolutely possible if we transform the political values and interests and the mindset.
Finally, we're coming to the end of the course. But before reaching it, I want to remind you that at the beginning, I said you could get Jeffrey Lippman and learn a little, or Jeffrey Sachs and learn a lot? Well, here is the last video I'm going to play, and it is Jeffrey Sachs, and he is here to remind us what this is all about.
This is a topic of a lot of interest and curiosity, as it is around the world. It's also not a simple topic. I will give you a quiz question right now. So if you really want to be an insider in this topic, you have to be able to identify the following initials: GHG, GCF, MOI, INDC, GEF, IPCC, UNFCCC. If you score it all, you pass and you should become a climate negotiator. If, like the rest of humanity, you say, what is that? This is part of the challenge of taking a very intricate set of negotiations and helping to make them reach the world public whose future depends on them in an effective manner. All of those initials, those acronyms, refer to parts of a complicated global negotiating process that involves a very complicated set of challenges, yet that boil down to some very difficult and stark problems for the whole planet. I want to start back at the basics just for a couple of minutes and then proceed back to all of those initials and acronyms. So the basics are just a bad accident. And the bad accident is that the way we use energy in the world, while very important for our economic well-being, turns out to be very dangerous for the planet and the climate when carried out at large scale. The problem is that when we burn coal, oil, and natural gas, which runs the world economy, the carbon in those carbon fuels combusts with oxygen. That's what creates the energy. Carbon dioxide is released into the air. And carbon dioxide is what's called a greenhouse gas. It means that it allows the sunshine to reach the Earth, the ultraviolet radiation to reach the planet, to warm the Earth. But when the Earth, in response to the warming, radiates heat back out to space in the form of infrared radiation, that radiation is trapped by the carbon dioxide. It doesn't simply go back to space. That makes the planet warmer. By the way, that's what allows life on Earth. But if there's too much greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, the planet warms beyond its natural equilibrium. And that's what's happening now because of how much coal, oil, and gas the world as a whole is using. There are several greenhouse gases that are being pumped into the atmosphere by our human actions. Carbon dioxide is the main one. The second most important is methane, which is a byproduct of agriculture and of our waste dumps and of other industrial processes. That's CH4. And the third is nitrous oxide, which also is a byproduct of agriculture and industrial processes. And then there are a number of very particular industrial chemicals that have fluorine in them that also have this greenhouse effect. Now, the idea that these greenhouse gases warm the planet is not a new idea. It actually was first propounded by a French scientist in 1824, 190 years ago. Joseph Fourier said our atmosphere keeps the planet warm through this kind of effect. That was even before the chemistry was understood. And then in the 19th century, the chemistry was worked out, and then a great genius named Svante Arrhenius, a Nobel laureate in Sweden, during an 18-month period without a computer, of course, without any models, was able to work out by paper and pencil the effect of doubling the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere on the temperature of Earth. And he calculated correctly that this would be somewhere between 2 degrees Celsius and 5 degrees Celsius. It was an act of great genius that he could figure that out, because it took a century of computer models and great advances in Earth science to confirm his findings from 1896. But Dr. Arrhenius made one assumption that turned out not to be correct. He said back in 1896 that because humanity was burning so much coal, that the doubling of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would take about 750 years. It turns out that because of the growth of the world economy and the rise of China in particular recently, the acceleration of coal and oil and gasoline use has been so dramatic that what Dr. Arrhenius thought would take 750 years is going to be compressed into 150 years. And for us, we're 120 years into that process, so there's just 30 years left, basically. We've reached the end of the safe period, or even the relatively safe period, of how much greenhouse gas, mainly carbon dioxide, but also methane and nitrous oxide, can be put into the atmosphere. Now, there are still a few people around the world that say this is not right. But actually, the scientific community is in as much consensus about these facts that I've just stated as about any scientific facts. In other words, the theory is very well established, very detailed. There is a campaign by some members of the oil industry to try to discredit this worldwide. And so there's a lot of propaganda. We have a newspaper called the Wall Street Journal in the United States. It's the biggest newspaper in the world. It's actually a great newspaper, except on the fantasy pages called the editorial page, which is science fiction or anti-science pages, because it's run by Mr. Rupert Murdoch, who is one of the most cynical people in the world, and his friends from the oil sector. But there's really no doubt, actually, about these facts and about how serious they are, and about how our time is running out to do something. When the scientists have looked at this issue from many different points of view, they've reached a basic conclusion, which is that we should keep the warming on average on the planet to below 2 degrees Celsius. And that level was agreed by the world's governments in 2009 and then formalized in another agreement in 2010. So there's already a world standard. Keep warming less than 2 degrees Celsius. What does that mean? Less than 2 degrees compared to what? Compared to the temperatures that prevailed before the industrial era began 2 centuries ago. Now, we've already increased the temperature through this greenhouse effect by 0.85 of 1 degree Celsius. So we're almost halfway to the 2 degree limit. And given what we've done so far in raising the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the Earth is still catching up to that warming because it takes a long time to heat the bathtub we call the oceans. They don't warm instantly. They absorb a huge amount of heat before they warm. In fact, the oceans absorb about 90% of the net heat imbalance of the planet, the land only 10%. So the oceans are warming gradually, and if we just had the existing level of greenhouse gases from now forever, the planet would probably warm to about 1.4 or 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. In other words, we're almost at the end of the margin of the 2 degrees C. How can we stay below the 2 degrees C? Well, for that you need climate science to say how much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases can be put into the air and still stay most likely below the 2 degree limit. And the answer is a little bit grim for us, ladies and gentlemen, because the answer is that if we want to keep below the 2 degree limit, there's only about 1,000 billion tons of carbon dioxide left that we could put into the air. But every year now, the world is emitting 36 billion tons by all of the coal, oil, and gas that is being burned. So if you just do the arithmetic, 1,000 divided by 36, we have less than 30 years left before we reach a threshold that will put us above the 2 degrees C, very likely. That's not good. It's even worse than that simple calculation for two reasons. First, the world economy is growing, and therefore the emissions of carbon dioxide are also growing, so we're not even constant at the 36 billion level. In other words, we have even less time than simply making that division. The second problem is that the other greenhouse gases are also increasing, so the amount available for carbon dioxide is therefore reduced from roughly 1,000 billion tons remaining to about 875 million tons. So divide 875 by 36 and you get an even smaller number. In other words, time is running out. Some people say, who cares? The reason we care is that the amount of damage we can do to the planet is frightening, it's unknowable, but it's potentially catastrophic. There are two big problems with 2 degrees C. One is that we'll have a lot more disruptions like the floods you had last May, or like the 2 meters of snow that are falling yesterday and today in Buffalo, 2 meters in 2 days, because the atmosphere now carries so much more water in a warmer environment. So you have these catastrophic events, whether it's rains or massive snows or the massive floods that you experienced or the droughts, the heat waves, and so forth. That's one set of problems. The other problem is that the scientists tell us that the Earth is like an unstable balance, that if we push it too hard, it can spin even further out of control, what are called tipping points. And the scientists are begging the policy makers and the rest of us, stay below 2 degrees. We can't predict afterwards that we don't have an onward spiral, a tipping point that puts us out of control. You'd think we'd kind of care about this, but we barely have acted. This comes to the next problem, which is what to do. Well, the world did get together 22 years ago to sign one of those initials, UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's the law of the land. Serbia is a signatory, the United States is a signatory, all the world's countries have signed an agreement to stabilize the concentration of greenhouse gases in order to avoid dangerous anthropogenic interference in the climate system. That's the phrase. Anthropogenic means caused by humanity. So stabilize the greenhouse gases to avoid dangerous anthropogenic interference. 22 years later, we haven't done it yet because there's huge momentum or inertia in the world's energy system. Coal, oil, and gas are great energy sources if it were not for the fact that they are wrecking the planet. In other words, nothing's wrong with them. We wouldn't even have a modern world without coal, oil, and gas. But this side effect is really a big problem now. So even though we don't want to do something about it, we have to do something about it, but it's quite hard because it's saying let's change the guts of the world economy. You know, a small sector can change here and there, but when you talk about energy, you're talking about the very heart of the world economy, the thing that makes all the rest of the sectors work. And we have to move beyond the fossil fuels, and shockingly, we have to do it within 2 generations. And we had 3 generations to do it, but we gave up 1 because we spent the last 22 years talking about all those initials, but not actually doing anything. So we're really running out of time to do something. What needs to be done? 1,000 things, but I'll try to describe just 3 things. 3 things to move us from a fossil fuel-based world economy to a low-carbon world economy. Number 1, much more energy efficiency. We have to get more output per unit energy. We can do that. There's some simple ways, for example, making sure that buildings are better insulated and better designed so that when the heat is pumped in, it doesn't just go out of the building. And there's a huge amount of gain that can be made just from energy saving. Second is we have to produce electricity in a low carbon manner. But the whole world needs to move to solar power, wind power, nuclear power, what's called carbon capture and sequestration, which means burn the coal but then prevent the carbon dioxide from going into the air, hydropower, or a few other technologies that also can play a role but probably at a smaller scale, like geothermal power. So the second pillar is what's called decarbonizing electricity. The third pillar is electrifying the transport sector and the building sector. When we drive our cars, we have internal combustion engines. Within 20 years, those are going to have to be electric vehicles instead, charged by low carbon electricity or equivalent technologies like fuel cells. And when you warm your building, you have a furnace or a boiler, and in the future, that's going to have to be electricity turning a heat pump. So it's going to have to be electrification rather than boilers and furnaces in buildings. These are the basic 3 pillars for any economy. And every part of the world has to scratch its head and said, what do we do? What is our potential? How much hydropower do we have? How much sunshine do we have? How much wind power do we have? What should we do? Should we try coal capture, carbon capture and sequestration, and so on? Every country needs a strategy for deep decarbonization, we call it. In other words, a transition out of the carbon economy. This issue will not go away. In fact, it will become central to national, regional, and global politics inevitably, one way or another, in the coming years.
This brings us now to the end of our final session. I first of all want to thank ETC, Eduardo, Theodora, and Jennifer for their really strong support for this training program and for their engagement and for the next steps which we are envisaging together, which is to find 3 pilot destinations who'll work with us to see how we can bring in some of the ideas that we've raised with you today that we at Cenex Malta are pursuing. And this will be at no cost or at the most providing for an internship to work with us on these processes. And we're hopeful that we have Malta already signed up, and we're hopeful that we'll have a couple more, ideally and greatly from you guys who've been on the course for the past 5 days, because that gives a great starting point. And to quote Chairman Mao, the long march started with a short step. Our sights are firmly set on 2030 and 2050, but we have a sense of urgency of needing to start now and needing to do it in a holistic, all-engaging fashion.